They were the guardians of heaven, radiant beings forged in divine fire. But curiosity is a dangerous light. When the first watcher looked down and saw the daughters of men, something ancient stirred. Love, desire, defiance. They descended, and the world was never the same. What followed was not a tale of heroes or villains, but of temptation, rebellion, and judgment written across the stars. This is not myth. This is the Book of Enoch, a text hidden for millennia, revealing what happened when heaven's own angels fell for humanity and paid the ultimate price. Tonight, we descend with them to witness the forbidden. Before the first dawn, before the earth had shape or sea, there was order, not the order of men and kings, but of light itself, woven by hands unseen, sustained by law older than memory. In that vast silence beyond stars, there were those who watched. They were not gods nor mortals. They were sentinels, the watchers, radiant beings of purpose and obedience, bound by a single command to guard creation from corruption. Their gaze stretched across the newborn world, mountains breathing fog, rivers carving their first songs through stone, winds whispering across fields of dust. They beheld mankind fragile and luminous, moulded from earth yet carrying the spark of heaven. The watchers marvelled at this new being, weak in flesh yet limitless in spirit. To them humanity was both miracle and mystery. Enoch's name had not yet risen in the annals of heaven, but even then there were whispers. A mortal who walked upright, whose heart burned with truth. He would later become the bridge between realms, but for now the story belonged to the ones above. The watchers looked down and something began to stir. Not rebellion, no, not yet, but wonder. And wonder in heaven is the beginning of danger. There were leaders among them, Semyaza, strong, resolute, his light tinged with curiosity. Azazel, radiant and proud, his knowledge deeper than oceans. They were loyal once, devoted to the Creator's will. Yet when they gazed upon mankind, their perfect calm began to fracture. They saw men toil and laugh, weep and love. They saw firelight reflected in human eyes, and in that reflection, the shadow of desire. The first temptation was not beauty, it was freedom. For in heaven all things are pure, but none are free. The watchers obeyed, and in obedience they found meaning. Yet each dawn that rose upon the earth showed them something they lacked: imperfection, choice, and the pulse of mortality. They began to long for it, as if creation itself called them by name. The Book of Enoch says they watched from the high places, from the clouds that graze the mountains. Beneath them walked the daughters of men whose laughter echoed like bells across the valleys. The watchers had no need of breath or warmth, but suddenly the cold of heaven felt unbearable. The distance between the divine and the human became an ache, too deep to ignore, and so they whispered among themselves. They spoke of descent, of what it would mean to walk the earth as men do, to feel grass beneath their feet, to taste rain, to love. But descent meant defiance. It meant breaking the very law that sustained creation. One step closer and light would turn to shadow. Still the idea grew, spreading like a spark in dry fields. The air above the world thickened with unrest. The stars themselves seemed to tremble. Even the righteous among them felt the pull, a gravity that drew heaven downward. It is said that Semyaza stood upon the edge of heaven's veil, his wings catching the first red of dawn. "We are not gods," he murmured, "and yet we are bound like slaves. They," and he pointed to the earth below, "are free to err, to sin, to feel. Shall we only watch while they live?" No voice answered him, but the silence was louder than thunder. The decision had not been made, yet in that silence destiny turned its gaze. Meanwhile, upon the earth, humanity thrived, unaware of what loomed above. Villages grew by rivers, songs rose over fields, and offerings smoked upon crude altars. They prayed to unseen powers, never knowing how near those powers stood. The sky, which once seemed indifferent, had begun to look back. The heavens are not immune to envy. And so among the watchers a secret oath was whispered, that none would descend alone. If one fell, all would fall. This was not rebellion of hate, but of love misdirected, the longing that refused to obey. As centuries passed, the bond tightened. Their devotion to heaven turned brittle, their reverence turned to yearning, and in the heart of that yearning lay the seed of their undoing. Enoch, still mortal and unknowing, would one day be the witness to all this. He would walk among angels, record their fall, and speak their sentence. But the story had not reached him yet. The balance of creation was still holding, barely. The winds over the mountains carried whispers. The watchers have grown restless. The stars dimmed for a moment, a sign unnoticed by men, but felt by every being of light. For rebellion never begins in fire, it begins in thought, in a question too dangerous to answer, and in the silence before the descent, the universe held its breath. The night that followed was still, yet beneath its calm, something vast shifted. The watchers stood on the border of eternity, staring down at the sleeping world. One by one, wings folded. One by one, hearts faltered. Above them stretched the unbroken order of heaven. Below, the fragile, burning pulse of humanity. For the first time in all creation, angels hesitated. They did not yet know the cost. They did not yet see the shadow waiting in the promise of love. But history and heaven would remember what came next. The night of the descent began like any other, still, boundless, perfumed by the breath of stars. Yet within that stillness there pulsed a quiet defiance, the kind that can overturn heaven itself. Semyaza stood upon the highest edge of the firmament, his wings trembling with light. Around him gathered the 200 who had sworn the oath. No mortal would ever see their faces, but their names would be carved into the bones of time. They had watched humanity long enough to feel the ache of separation. The children of earth laughed beneath the moon, made fires that pushed back the dark and held one another through the night. The watchers envied them that warmth, not the flame of hearth, but of heart. They envied the imperfection that made human love real. Semyaza's voice was soft, yet it carried like thunder through the stars. "Let us go down," he said, "for it is written that we are guardians of men. But can we guard what we do not understand? Can we love the Creator if we do not love what He has made?" For a moment there was hesitation, the kind that feels like eternity. Above them, the throne burned unseen, watching. Below them the world waited. One by one the watchers gave their assent. They would descend together, none would turn back, and so it began. The sky tore like silk. From the heavens poured fire, silver and silent, tracing lines across the firmament. The people of earth looked up in terror, thinking the stars were falling. Shepherds abandoned their flocks, mothers clutched their children. The night itself seemed alive. The watchers fell, not as meteors, but as light made flesh. Their wings dimmed, their radiance burned away in the friction of creation. When they landed upon the mountains, the earth shuddered, not from destruction, but from recognition. Heaven had touched ground. Mount Hermon would bear the mark of that night forever. Its peaks glowed faintly as if remembering. There, under the veiled sky, they swore their second oath, to take wives among the daughters of men, and to reveal to them the secrets of heaven. The stars blinked out one by one as though ashamed. At first, humanity did not understand what had come among them. The watchers appeared as men, tall and luminous, with eyes that carried the weight of eternity. They spoke gently, walked humbly, and were revered as gods. Villages offered gifts, kings bowed, and among the women of the earth whispers spread of beings who neither aged nor ailed, who looked upon mortals not with hunger, but with wonder. They took wives, and for a time the world seemed blessed. The harvests grew richer, the skies clearer. The Watchers taught humankind skills once reserved for the divine, the art of writing, of metal, of stars. They taught the knowledge of roots and stones, of music and reflection. The world awakened. But knowledge once shared cannot be contained. What began as devotion turned into dominion. The Watchers began to revel in the adoration of men, building temples of gold and obsidian. Songs once meant for heaven were now sung to them, and from the unions of angel and human came children unlike either the Nephilim. Giants, fierce and beautiful, with voices that shook the trees and hearts that knew no restraint. They were not born of sin, but of imbalance, too much light in vessels of clay. Their power was unmatched, their hunger unending. They ruled like kings, yet consumed like storms. The world that had once glowed with divine favour began to darken. The Watchers, seeing what they had wrought, turned their faces from heaven. They had loved too deeply, and now their love devoured all things. Semyaza stood upon the mountain top again, but the stars above him no longer shimmered. "We wish to understand humanity," he whispered. "Now we have become them." His voice cracked, carrying the sound of wings breaking. Azazel, the teacher of weapons and adornment, smiled bitterly. "We gave them beauty and strength," he said. "It is not our fault they use it to destroy." But even he knew that every sword forged by human hands was an echo of their rebellion. Enoch was still far from their world, still a shepherd of peace, unaware of the storm gathering beyond the clouds. Yet his name was already being spoken in heaven. The Creator would soon send him as the messenger of judgment. But for now, the earth trembled under the weight of angels who wanted to love and forgot how to obey. In the cities below, the Nephilim began to fight among themselves. Their size was terrible, their appetites greater. They devoured herds, forests, and finally men. The rivers ran thick with ruin. The cries of the dying rose into the sky. And for the first time since creation, heaven wept. The Watchers tried to hide their sorrow behind power. They built altars, carved their names in stone, and swore that heaven would never find them. But creation itself cannot lie. The mountains felt their shame, the winds carried their defiance to the stars. And in the quiet of the seventh night, when even the giants slept, a voice moved across the earth. Not thunder, not wind, but something older. It called them by name. Every Watcher heard it in his heart, a whisper from the throne they had forsaken. "Why have you left your station?" There was no answer. The voice did not need one, for light cannot hide from its source. And though the heavens were silent, the sentence had already begun. The first step had been taken. The descent was complete. What followed would not be choice, but consequence. The world would remember the night when angels fell not from hatred, but from love too pure to be allowed. The days that followed were unlike any the earth had seen. The sun rose blood red over cities of dust and gold, where the Nephilim walked like gods among insects. Their laughter thundered across valleys, their hunger echoed in every field. What had begun as wonder now festered into terror. The children of angels did not inherit their father's wisdom, only their power. And power, untempered by restraint, devours itself. The Watchers watched no longer. They ruled. Azazel taught men to craft swords and spears from the ore of the mountains, whispering secrets of war that no mortal was meant to hear. He taught women the ways of adornment, to line their eyes with metals, to weave gold into their hair, not to glorify heaven, but to enslave hearts. And mankind, dazzled by beauty and armed with new strength, began to forget the one who had made them. Semyaza saw it and grieved. He had believed their descent would bring light. Instead, it had spread shadow. His brothers no longer spoke of heaven. They spoke of dominion. They walked among mortals as kings, demanded sacrifices, and built cities in their own image. The names of the Watchers replaced the name of God on the tongues of men. The Nephilim too grew restless. They consumed not only beasts but men. Tribes vanished overnight, swallowed by the hunger of giants. The earth, once green and fertile, began to bleed. Rivers turned black with ash. The skies dimmed with smoke from burning altars. The cries of mothers and the clash of iron reached the heavens, and even the stars seemed to turn their faces away. And in that darkness, something older than the Watchers stirred. The sorrow of the world itself. The mountains groaned. The winds carried lament. The ground trembled under the weight of injustice. Creation had become corrupted, not by one sin, but by the chain of all sins joined hand in hand. The book of Enoch tells that the souls of men began to cry out to the heavens for mercy. Their voices reached beyond the firmament, beyond the veil of stars, into the courts of light. There the holy ones heard. Michael the defender, Gabriel the messenger, Raphael the healer, Uriel the watcher of the world. They looked upon the earth and saw what their fallen brethren had done. Behold, said Michael, the world they were sent to guard, now drowning in their desire. Uriel bowed his head. Even angels can forget who they are when they look too long at what they love. Gabriel's voice trembled like wind over flame. Then what is to be done? Can heaven forgive what heaven itself forbade? But Raphael, who knew compassion best, whispered, Forgiveness is for the repentant, and they have not repented. And so the four rose before the throne, carrying the cries of earth in their hands. Lord of spirits, they said, look upon what the Watchers have wrought. The sons of heaven have defiled the daughters of men. The earth groans beneath their violence. Shall creation be left to perish? The voice that answered was not rage, but sorrow, a sound like oceans collapsing into silence. My world will not die by their hand, it said. I shall cleanse it for the sake of the righteous. The Watchers shall see what it means to be bound by their own choice. Far below, the fallen felt the air shift. The skies darkened with clouds that glowed from within, as if heaven itself was watching. Through a veil, Enoch, still among men, looked up and felt the first whisper of destiny. Something vast was moving toward him, a summons older than his birth. But on the mountain, Semyaza stood alone. Around him, the other Watchers feasted, sang, and crowned themselves gods. He could hear the distant wails of mortals, the collapsing forests, the weeping of the rivers. We have brought them knowledge, he said softly, but knowledge without wisdom is a blade without a hilt. Azazel laughed from the fires below. A blade still cuts, and those who hold it are gods, but even as he spoke the fire's light flickered, as though heaven's gaze passed over it. The air itself began to shudder with something unseen. The Nephilim felt it first, a heaviness in their blood, a trembling in their bones. They raised their massive hands toward the sky, but the sky offered no comfort. The stars were fading one by one. The night had turned against them. The earth had become a place of beauty built upon bones. Cities gleamed with metal that reflected no light. Temples stood silent, their altars drenched in blood. The songs of angels had become the roars of beasts, and through it all, the Watchers watched, proud, unrepentant, and terrified by what they had made. Then one night, when the wind was still and the moon hung low, Semyaza dreamt. In his vision, he saw rivers reversing their flow, mountains sinking into the sea, and a figure of light descending, not to save, but to warn. He woke with a cry that shook the valley. The others mocked him, saying, "You fear shadows, brother. We are the lords of this world now." But Semyaza knew better. Heaven does not forget. Far above, the record of their fall was being written, not in books of man, but in light by hands unseen. Every act of cruelty, every whisper of arrogance, every drop of blood cried out to be weighed. Judgment was no longer coming, it had already begun. The Watchers had crossed a boundary no creature was meant to cross. They had taken the gifts of heaven and turned them to hunger. They had traded eternity for desire, and the world they loved would be the first to pay the price. The silence before judgment was not peace. It was the breath the universe takes before it speaks. The heavens had watched long enough. The cries of the innocent had reached their threshold, and even the stars began to tremble with waiting. In the courts of heaven, light moved like a tide. 4 great angels stood before the throne: Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel. Their wings, vast and solemn, cast shadows that touched the very edges of eternity. They bowed, not in fear, but in sorrow. For justice was coming, and even the pure dread its weight. The voice that filled the halls was not loud. It was quiet, absolute, the kind of sound that silences thought itself. "Look upon my creation," it said. "See what they have done to it." And the angels looked. They saw the mountains burned for metal, the rivers choked with the ashes of giants. They saw altars drenched in the blood of beasts and men, built in the names of those who were once their brothers. They saw the laughter of mortals fading into prayerless silence. Michael's hands trembled around his sword of light. "They were sent to Guy," he whispered, "and they have become the destroyers." Raphael closed his eyes. "They pitied the weak," he said softly, "and forgot that love without obedience is corruption." Uriel's gaze burned brighter. "Then the time has come," he said. "The law must be restored." Gabriel, who had carried messages of mercy for eons, lowered his head. "Who will deliver the decree?" And the answer came, "There is one among men whose heart is pure. He shall speak for me. His name is Enoch." Below, on the scarred earth, Enoch walked alone through the ruins of what had once been harmony. He heard the thunder of the Nephilim's steps far off, the roar of their hunger shaking the plains. Above, the sky was swollen with storm. When the light came, it was not of the sun. A figure descended, robed in radiance, wings folded against the wind. "Enoch," it said, "man of truth, rise. You have been chosen." The shepherd fell to his knees, shielding his eyes. "Chosen for what?" "To bear witness," the angel replied. "The Most High has seen the corruption of the earth. The Watchers who descended shall answer for their sins, and you, Son of Man, shall carry the words of judgment." Enoch trembled. "Who am I to speak to those who are made of flame?" "You are what they have forgotten to be," said the angel, "obedient. Far to the north, where Mount Hermon pierced the clouds, the Watchers gathered. Semyaza stood at their head, his eyes hollow. The Nephilim surrounded them like mountains given breath. When the messenger appeared, Michael himself, radiant and unyielding, the sky darkened with fire. "You were sent to guard," he said, his voice rolling like thunder. "Instead, you became the corruptors. You taught men war and women vanity. You made gods of yourselves and demons of your sons." Azazel laughed, though the sound was empty. "We gave them what they desired. Knowledge, strength, passion. Would you have kept them ignorant?" Michael's gaze flared like the birth of a star. "You confused freedom with ruin. You gave them tools without wisdom, power without conscience, and now the earth groans beneath your pride." Semyaza stepped forward. "We loved them," he said. "Is love rebellion?" "It is when it leads to death," Michael answered. "Even angels are not free to defy their own creation." The wind rose, tearing through the valleys. The giants howled, feeling the air tighten like a noose. The mountain shook, and from its heart a light erupted that no mortal eye could bear. One by one the watchers fell to their knees. The light did not burn, it bound. Chains of fire wove around their limbs, radiant and unbreakable. Their wings dimmed. Their voices fell silent. Heaven had spoken. Azazel was the first to scream. His body sank into the stone as if swallowed by the earth itself. "You cannot catch eternity," he cried. But eternity does not argue. Semyaza bowed his head, tears of light running down his spine. "Tell him," he said to Michael, "that we were not wicked, only lost." Michael's reply was quiet, almost tender. "He already knows." Then he raised his hand, and the storm answered. Lightning struck the peaks. Thunder split the heavens. The Nephilim, seeing their father's fall, roared in rage and fear. They tore the earth, fought the wind, but their strength was dust before the will that shaped the universe. The ground opened beneath them, swallowing their cities, their temples, their songs. Enoch stood far away, watching from the plains. The angel beside him spoke, "Write what you see, for this is not merely the fall of angels, but the cleansing of the world. What is broken must be washed clean." And Enoch wrote. He wrote of fire and flood, of grief and renewal, of the love that led to ruin and the mercy that followed wrath. He wrote until his tears blurred the ink. When he finished, the angel touched his hand. "This book will endure," he said. "Even when memory fades, the story of the watchers will remain, for men must never forget what happens when heaven envies earth." As dawn broke, the last of the thunder rolled across the horizon. Smoke rose where the mountains once stood, and silence returned to the world. But in that silence there was not peace, only mourning. The watchers were gone, their voices bound beneath stone and shadow, yet the echo of their descent lingered in the wind, a whisper of wings that once defied eternity. And high above, in the vault of the sky, the stars flickered once more, not in celebration, but in warning. For every fall begins with love, and every love, without obedience, becomes its own destruction. When the last echo of thunder faded, Enoch stood alone beneath a bruised sky. The world was quiet now, too quiet. Smoke drifted from the mountains where angels had fallen, curling upward like ghosts trying to return to heaven. The rivers ran slower, as if the earth itself was exhausted. But amid the ruin, Enoch's heart was steady. He had seen what no mortal was meant to see. Angels in chains, giants buried beneath the dust, the weight of divine justice descending like a storm. He should have been afraid. Instead, he felt only awe. For days he walked, guided by silence. Each night the same dream returned, a stairway of light stretching beyond the stars, and a voice calling his name, not with sound, but with certainty. "Enoch," it said, "come." On the seventh night, the dream became real. The air shimmered, shadows bent, a brilliance poured from the horizon, neither fire nor seed sun, but something between. And from that light, 3 figures descended, tall, radiant, unearthly. "Fear not," said the first, whose eyes were like molten gold. "You are called." Enoch fell to his knees. "Where will you take me?" "To the place where the fallen are judged," the second replied. And then higher. The third stretched out his hand. "For you will see the design of creation and the fate of those who defied it." And before Enoch could speak, the ground vanished. He rose, weightless, past the clouds and into the trembling firmament. Below him the world shrank to a whisper. The scars of war, the blackened forests, the silent valleys, blurred beneath veils of mist. Above, the stars were alive, singing in tones older than memory. The first heaven unfolded like a sea of crystal. Countless beings moved through its light, creatures of flame, faceless yet filled with purpose. They bowed as Enoch passed, whispering his name as though it had always been known. In the second heaven he saw the prisons of the stars, vast caverns of shimmering energy where the celestial fires were kept. There, angels guarded the paths of comets, the births of worlds, the deaths of suns. Enoch trembled at their majesty, but the angels only smiled. "Do not fear," they said. "You walk not in trespass, but in witness." In the third he saw the realm of souls, an ocean of light where voices rose in endless prayer. The righteous glowed like morning, the lost drifted like shadows at the edge. "These are the spirits of men," his guide whispered, waiting for the day of restoration. But in the fourth heaven, Enoch's heart faltered. He saw the Watchers, bound in the abyss of wind and shadow, their light extinguished, their wings tattered and blackened by sorrow. They were vast still, but diminished, like stars drowned in deep water. Their eyes found him, and for a moment, heaven itself seemed to shudder with grief. "Semyaza," Enoch whispered. The fallen leader lifted his head. "You are the messenger," he said. His voice was a ruin of thunder. "Tell him, tell the Most High that we remember. We loved too fiercely. That was our sin." Enoch's eyes filled with tears. "There is no message I can carry but his own," he said softly. And as he spoke, light broke across the chasm. The Watchers shielded their faces as Michael descended, a blade of radiance in his hand. "Their time is done," the archangel said. "Their petitions will not be heard. Their judgment is sealed." The chains of fire glowed brighter, and the abyss shuddered shut. When it was over, Enoch fell to his knees. "Why show me this?" he asked. "Because you must understand," said the angel beside him. "Even in heaven, love is not without consequence. To bear witness is to bear sorrow." They carried him higher still. In the fifth heaven, he saw the armies of light, hosts without number, preparing for the end of days. In the sixth, he saw the vaults of creation, where time itself was written in scrolls of flame. And finally in the seventh, he stood before the throne. He could not see the one who sat upon it. No mortal eyes could, but he felt the presence, a weight that was not heavy, a silence that spoke every truth at once. "Enoch," the voice said, "you have seen the fall and the fate of the Watchers. You have seen the order that binds all things. Write what you have witnessed, for generations yet unborn will forget the cost of disobedience. You shall be the scribe of heaven, and no longer shall you dwell among men." Enoch bowed low, tears falling like rain into light. "Then this is farewell," he said. "No," answered the voice. "It is transformation." The angels surrounded him, and the air thickened with radiance. His mortal flesh dissolved like dew under dawn. His heart, once bound by breath, began to glow with the pulse of eternity. In that instant, he became what the scriptures would later call Metatron, the scribe of God, the witness of all that was and will be. From below, the earth lay quiet once more. The flood had not yet come, but its shadow stretched across the horizon. Mankind, unaware of the drama written in the stars above, continued to till the soil, to sing, to dream. But somewhere in the deep of every soul there remained an echo, a faint memory of the day angels walked among men, and of the man who rose beyond them. And though Enoch was gone, his words remained, carved into light, waiting to be found. The days after Enoch's ascent were filled with a strange quiet, as if the world itself held its breath. The skies no longer glowed with the rage of heaven, nor did the stars sing as they once had. There was stillness, the kind that comes after weeping, the kind that comes before the end. The watchers were gone, their names carved into the silence beneath the mountains. The Nephilim, their monstrous children, roamed the ruins of their fallen kingdoms. Their laughter was hollow now, echoing through forests stripped bare. They devoured what little life remained, but even their strength began to fade, for heaven had withdrawn its breath from them. The air itself turned against their lungs, the waters refused their reflection. Creation was healing, and to heal it had to forget. Yet even as judgment fell, there were remnants of grace. Among men, the story of Enoch spread like wind through reeds. They spoke of the shepherd who walked with the angels, who had seen heaven's fire and lived. Some said he had become a star. Others said he had been taken so the world might be remade. But none knew how near that remaking truly was. The rains began as whispers, thin, hesitant drops that vanished into the dust, but each day they grew bolder until the sky itself cracked open. Lightning raged across the horizon like veins of living light. Thunder rolled from one edge of the world to the other. The oceans rose in answer, and the mountains, once the thrones of angels, became islands in a single endless sea. The flood did not roar, it mourned. It was not vengeance, but cleansing, washing away the echoes of rebellion, the altars, the idols, the laughter of the Nephilim. It rolled over the temples of Azazel, the palaces of Semyaza, the bones of those who had called themselves divine. Their songs were swallowed whole, their kingdoms erased. For the first time since creation, the earth was silent again. Somewhere in that deluge, a single vessel drifted, a remnant of mercy. Within it, the lineage of Enoch endured. The thread of righteousness the flood could not sever. But even Noah, who steered it through the abyss of waters, carried the memory of his ancestor, the man who had walked with God and vanished into light. When the rains finally ceased, the sun rose over a new world. The air was sharp, clean, almost shy. Rivers traced new paths through the valleys, and the land, though scarred, breathed again. The ruins of the old world slept beneath the waves, guarded by silence and time, and in the highest reaches of heaven Enoch watched. He saw the light return to the soil, the birds nesting once more in the trees. He saw children play in fields that had once burned. But he also saw the shadow that lingers in every heart, the same curiosity, the same desire, the same spark that had called the watchers down. For even in a world reborn, humanity remained what it had always been, capable of both worship and defiance. The voice of the Most High came to him again. Do you see, Enoch? The circle is not broken. It turns. Always it turns. Enoch bowed his head. Then will it fall again? All things fall, said the voice, but not all are lost. The flood washed away the sin of angels, but not the longing that made them fall. That longing lives in every soul, waiting for choice. Enoch looked down once more at the tiny lights of men's fires flickering in the dusk. Then perhaps, he said quietly, we are all watchers, waiting to see if we can love without defying what made us. And in the silence that followed, heaven itself seemed to sigh. For a long time Enoch said nothing. He wandered the halls of eternity, writing what he saw, the rise and fall of empires, the birth of stars, the prayers that never reached the sky. He wrote not to condemn, but to remind. His words became the book of Enoch, a testament to what happens when love forgets its limits and knowledge loses its humility. Centuries would pass. The flood would become legend. The names of the watchers would fade into myth, their cities swallowed by sand and sea. But the echoes remained, in the fear of the thunder, in the reverence for the stars, in the old stories told beside firelight. There were once angels who loved too much, and a man who saw them fall. And though the world would change 1,000 times, the lesson would not. For even now, when we gaze at the heavens, we are not just looking upward, we are remembering. Somewhere in that endless dark beyond the reach of mortal eyes, Enoch still writes. His pen moves through time itself, recording every rise, every fall, every prayer, whispered into the night. And perhaps, when we dream, we hear him, the quiet voice reminding us that creation was never destroyed, only rewritten. The earth dries, the sky's clear, the flood becomes memory, and from that memory life begins again. The Book of Enoch is not merely an account of angels and judgment, it is a mirror, showing us that the divine and the human are closer than we think, and that every act of love carries the weight of choice. The watchers fell not because they hated heaven, but because they could not bear to love from afar, and in their fall we are reminded of our own. That knowledge without reverence corrupts, that freedom without wisdom consumes, and that even after the flood, the echo of their wings still lingers in the heart of man.